What went wrong with Payday 2 on consoles? It's a question a lot of us ask, and it's one that doesn't ever really get a solid answer. It's no secret that Payday 2 has had a rocky history with its console versions, and as a result, the console community aren't known for having a very positive opinion towards Overkill and Starbreeze. But what caused this friction? Why are Payday 2 console updates so rare, and why does it take so long for PC Payday 2 content to make its way over to the console platforms? Well, today, I'm going to try to answer those questions. Since 2020 began nearly 7 months ago, I've only ever really been able to make videos about the PC version of Payday 2, because the fact of the matter is that's the only version that's had any real attention since this year started. While I have done a handful of console videos this year, it's fair to say that I haven't given a lot of attention to it, but it's not my fault. The simple issue of the matter is that I can't report news if there's no news to report, and I've been sat waiting for the last 7+ months for news of a console update. And all that time waiting just got me thinking about the questions that I opened this video with, and so I began a search. I gathered together every piece of information I could, everything I've learned over the last 3 years of making Payday 2 console videos, and now putting everything together in this video. I'm going to be exploring the issues that have led to the problems we see today with the console versions of Payday 2, because a lot of people spend their time writing long comments on my videos and elsewhere online, sharing their thoughts on these topics, but very rarely do these people actually have the whole picture. And I'm not saying that to offend you guys. A lot of the information that I'm going to cover in this video is either not well known enough by a lot of people, or just hasn't been explained very well in the past. And that's what I want to fix today. However, what I can tell you is that I am still currently in discussions with Overkill about trying to get more content updates out the door, and very recently I can say that I sat down and made a note of every mask, weapon, heist, and more that was missing on the console versions, and I actually sent it off to Overkill. Now my hope is that they may be able to look through that list, pick some things out that might be easy to develop, and put them out into an update. Even if it's a small update, it would just be nice to see something happen at this point. But I can't confirm if they're going to do that because I just don't know. I've sent them the list, and I'm hoping that as a partner they're going to take on board what I've said and have a look into it, but of course that doesn't promise that there will be any solid results. If there is, of course I will let you know. So without any further ado, my name is RedArcherLive, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to delve deep into the development of console updates and the problems therein. Let's get started. Let's begin this with a bit of context. Payday 2 is released on PC, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and Nintendo Switch. The Xbox 360 and PS3 versions were released at the same time as PC, but suffered early on when it came to post-launch content, with these versions being scrapped after receiving just one update containing the game's first 3 DLC packs. Understandably, console players were not very happy about this lack of content, but not long after those versions were scrapped, it was announced that Payday 2 will be coming back, bigger and better than ever, with the Crime Wave edition on Xbox One and PS4, containing almost every DLC on PC up to that point, with updated graphics and so on and so forth. These versions launched in 2015, only to be faced with the exact same problems as their predecessors. It took over 400 days for the first big content drop, the Big Score DLC, to release, containing 10 paid DLC packs and a ton of free content updates too. And since then, we've received 2 further big DLC updates and a handful of free content drops, with months of painstaking waiting in between each one of these drops. The most recent one arrived at the end of 2019, before which a message from a member of Overkill's console team, Goris, was posted online in the Steam forums and confirmed that an additional update was in the works, which would release sometime in 2020. However, in December 2019, just a couple of weeks after that confirmation, a post was published by Starbreeze CEO Mikhail Nermok, which seems to contradict that. The post, which was titled Winds of Change Consoles Edition, was written to clear up some mixed reports about the future of console updates for Payday 2. I did a full video on this article at the time. If you'd like to catch up, a link will be in the description, but I'll give you a very quick summary here. The PlayStation 4 and Xbox One versions are now no longer guaranteed to get any further console updates, and if they do, then the update will be almost guaranteed to not include the following 6 pieces of content shown on screen now. However, the rest of the accompanying content that came either alongside or separate to these features, such as masks, weapons, and attachments, could at some point find their way to consoles. The Nintendo Switch version, however, is not in the same situation, despite some people's beliefs on the contrary. The Nintendo Switch version was confirmed to be pretty much dead in the water, as Mikhail stated in this post that the version was not made in-house, and so Overkill staff don't have experience with developing Payday 2 content for the Nintendo Switch, and if they wanted to make DLC, they would have to outsource it to another company, which is just something they can't afford to do right now, an issue we'll touch on as this video proceeds. And so we came to the point that we're at now, where there's a lot of confusion, a lot of doubt, and a lot of uncertainty as to the future of console updates. So, with that context established, it's time to delve deep into the reasons why Payday 2's console versions have faced such troubles over the last few years. This video will be split into 3 key pillars, and each one of these pillars are a focal point of concern for the development of console updates. So let's kick off with the first of our 3 problems. I don't think there are many people left in the Payday community who don't at least have some idea of the financial issues Starbreeze have faced over the last few years, but let's just cover the basics very briefly. In 2017, after releasing the Gauge Rush and Weapon Pack DLC for PC, Overkill confirmed that Payday 2 would no longer have paid DLC updates, and that everything, bar the upcoming H3H3 character pack, of which Overkill saw none of the profits, would be free going forward. This was said at the same time as the reveal of Payday 2's Ultimate Edition, which will contain every single DLC on PC, apart from the H3H3 character pack, which had not released. Overkill explained why they made this decision by stating that they profited so much off Payday 2, a game which was profitable from pre-orders alone, and that 4 years after the game's release, they decided it was time to give back to the players who'd spent so much time and money on the game for the last few years by giving them all future updates for free. This was a promise they kept right up until the end of Payday 2's main life cycle with the release of the White House heist in October 2018. But of course, as we all know now, the White House didn't end up being the final content release for Payday 2, nor would the promise of free content continue to apply. After Overkill's The Walking Dead endured years of development hell and released to, let's face it, a disastrous reception, Starbreeze had reached their terminus. Payday 2 had not seen a paid DLC update release for over a year, and Starbreeze had no real strong sources of income anymore. They'd plunged millions upon millions of dollars into failed projects such as the virtual reality headset Star VR under the advisement of former CEO Bo Anderson, and so they'd run out of money and had to enter reconstruction, a process which freezes a company's assets while they write out a plan to pay off the debts they've got themselves into before they have to file for bankruptcy. After the reconstruction had ended a year later, Starbreeze had constructed a solid plan to bring some money back to their company, which would allow them to not only keep the lights on and avoid going right back into reconstruction, but would also allow them to fund their next big project, Payday 3, a game which was confirmed officially in 2016 and has been discussed ever since. And so enter the Silk Road updates for Payday 2 on PC, starting with the Border Crossing update in November 2019, which included paid DLC packs, going back on Overkill's promise of no more paid DLC. Mikhail Nermag discussed the breaking of this promise in a letter to the Payday 2 community, saying, "Now we're breaking the Ultimate Edition promise of forever free content. The reasoning for this is plain and simple. We want to move forward and make more of Payday 2, and to do so, we need your support to continue producing content. New DLCs will be a mix of paid and free updates." Most players accepted that this was a we have no choice situation, and the Silk Road updates have been generally very popular amongst PC players. However, this brings up another criticism I've seen, which is, why can't consoles get updates first before they start making new content on PC? And really, there are 2 key reasons why they can't do this, as much as I hate to admit them. Number 1, the remaining console content that Xbox One and PS4 need is only free content. Overkill would not stand to profit off any of the work they put in. And I know what you're thinking, H3H3 is still not on consoles. That DLC would not give Overkill any profit. All profits from that DLC pack go straight to H3H3, aside from the standard cut Sony and Microsoft would get, in the same way that Valve got their cut when the DLC was released on PC. So not only would they not profit from anything they release on consoles going forward, they would also lose money in the process of making it. It's not free to develop console updates, and in the situation they're in, as sad as it is to accept, they physically cannot afford to put that time in while they're still recovering from their past grievances. And point number 2, like it or not, PC is by far the most popular platform for Payday 2. Focusing on putting new paid content there is their best chance at securing funding to keep the company alive. If they don't get out some kind of DLC to keep the lights on and keep the company going, Payday 3 will never see the light of day. That's just the situation that we're in. And yes, I know that recently Starbreeze received a 250 million Swedish krona cash injection from their key investors, but sadly this cannot be funneled into console updates in the way you might hope. This money was given to them on the basis that it would primarily be used to pay off their existing debts and then to fund Payday 3. By law, they just cannot divert from those investments. So right now, money is still a big issue for Starbreeze, and they need to make sure that all of their investments will be able to reap rewards. And as it stands, putting money into console updates which wouldn't yield any profits are just not a feasible strategy while they're still trying to recover from the mistakes the company has made over the last few years. Does this mean there's no money at all that could be put to use on the console versions? No, of course not. But that does not mean there's a lot of money to put over there either. And like I said, at this current moment, it just doesn't strike me as a logical business decision for a company to make when they're still healing from a lot of financial mishaps. A lack of funding isn't the only sticking point for the future of console updates. When writing in his Winds of Change Consoles Edition post, Mikhail stated that we simply have too many constraints in available manpower to be able to fix the situation in the short term. To put it in more simple terms, Starbreeze doesn't have the staff available to work at developing content for Payday 2 on consoles. As a result of all their financial shortcomings, part of Starbreeze's strategy to stay in business was to lay off 25% of its workforce. In June 2019, a statement on their website confirmed that layoffs would take place and that 60 of their 240 employees would be laid off in the November of that year, in attempts to save 3 million Swedish krona annually. But it didn't stop there. A fair few Starbreeze staff members have since left the company of their own accord to explore other fields, such as Carl Lackner, the original face of Dallas in Payday the Heist and an art director on Payday 2. Now, those of you who saw my Payday 3 news video a couple of weeks ago, where we explored a Starbreeze company presentation, will remember that the presentation listed a total of 126 staff members currently working at Starbreeze, meaning that after the layoffs, a further 54 staff members either resigned in the way Carl did or were simply laid off. So Starbreeze now has nearly half the staff members that it had only a couple of years ago, meaning they've already got far less pairs of hands than they had when Payday 2 was at the height of its story in 2018. This company presentation also states that 83 of the remaining 126 staff members are game developers assigned to the Payday franchise, be it for Payday 2, Payday 3, or Payday Crime War. And additionally, around 45 of Starbreeze's game developers are already assigned to the development of Payday 3, more than half of the total currently working at Starbreeze. That leaves roughly 38 developers left to work on Payday 2 for PC, Payday 2 for console, and Payday Crime War. Now, while we don't know the exact split of people on each of those projects, it's safe to say that a fair majority of those people will be working on the project that's currently getting the most attention. You know, the one with paid DLCs releasing every few months, Payday 2 on PC. The point is, Payday 2's console versions don't have a lot of developers ready to develop content for it, and that really doesn't help to get more content out the door. And this isn't a situation that can be fixed by saying, we'll hire lots more staff. There's a reason the layoffs happened to begin with. Starbreeze can't afford to take on dozens more staff members. While it could be argued that with this 250 million krona that they received recently, that Starbreeze may be able to bring on more people to help the company. But remember, this injection is primarily aimed at paying off debts and developing Payday 3. So it's fair to say that anyone who may be hired using that money would only be brought on to go straight into the development of Payday 3 and not have anything to do with Payday 2 whatsoever, let alone the console versions. Sadly, in the situation we're in right now, it just doesn't seem likely that Starbreeze will be hiring any more developers for Payday 2's console versions anytime soon. Okay, we've talked about the money, we've talked about the staff. Let's take a look at our third, final, and perhaps most important pillar: the game engine. Payday 2 wasn't built in the typical kind of game engine you'd expect, such as Unity or Unreal Engine. The game was actually developed on Diesel Engine 2.0, the second edition of an engine built by Grin, who were a game development studio that Overkill originally owned before Grin went bankrupt years ago. Diesel was originally made for a 2001 racing game called Ballistics. Yep, Payday 2 is built on a driving game engine. You wouldn't believe it, would you? Okay, look, driving jokes aside, the point is that Diesel is not a common or popular game engine, and so the mechanics of that engine are very different if you try to compare it to other game engines such as those used in GTA 5, Call of Duty, or Battlefield. In fact, on screen now, I can show you every single game that's ever released which used Diesel Engine in its development, and as you can see, there's not many. Goris has said in the past that you can't compare Payday 2 to other games because Payday 2 operates on a completely different technical background, and this is exactly what he means. And on top of that, when I sat down to interview the face and voice of Chain's Damien Poitier back in 2018, the topic of Payday 2 on consoles came up in discussion, and he shared what he'd learned about the development of content for those versions. Here's what he had to say.
Here's what people miss. There's a couple of things, and I'm going to try not to talk out of turn here. Converting from PC and computers to console is not easy because that's completely basically rewriting the code. Once they finish whatever the update is for the PC, when they go to do the console, that's pretty much another team. It's not hitting a button and you send it over to Xbox and they update the game. No, there's a lot involved in it.
Now, this is a statement that I've heard time and time again since I first heard it in that interview, and once again, it ties into the game's engine. The simple and sad fact of the matter is, the Diesel is a terrible game engine, and it's not built for a game of Payday 2's caliber. As a result, when Overkill wants to transfer content from the PC version to consoles, it can't actually be straight up ported in the same way it can for other games and other game engines. In fact, everything has to be redeveloped from the ground up. Did it take 2 months for a heist to be conceptualized, designed, built, and finished? Okay, well after that, you've got to spend at least that amount of time yet again getting it ready for consoles. And that's just assuming there aren't any additional problems in console development, which, let's face it, in the past, there have been quite a few of those. Redeveloping this content from the ground up would require a lot of staff members, a great deal of money, and also a great deal of time. But as I've discussed in the previous 2 sections, we all know now that Overkill just don't have the staff or funding needed to support huge console updates like the ones they've released in the past. Earlier I mentioned 6 pieces of content stated in the Winds of Change Consoles Edition post, which were almost guaranteed to never come to consoles. Right above that list, Mikhail stated that the reason for this was that these items unfortunately have too high requirements in terms of optimization to be viable to port at this time. Payday 2 is a very content heavy game, packed to the brim with features, game modes, heists, weapons, characters, and much more, to the point where the game is bursting at the seams and can barely run competently on PC at this point. There are certain parts of the game, such as the safe house, that are not well optimized on even the best running computers, and so trying to get them to work on consoles when a lot of heists already suffer from problems such as severe frame rate drops, like the one you can see on screen now, would just be near impossible. While we would all love to see things like the safe house on console, it just isn't feasible using the engine Payday 2 has been built upon. And while it is a fair suggestion for people to say, well, why don't Overkill make their own safe house for console, you've got to appreciate that that itself would take a great deal of time as well to develop. And again, think about what we've said so far. Money and staff are just not things that Overkill have a plethora of right now that they can put to the console versions. As I'm sure you can agree by this point, any one of the 3 key pillars that I've discussed in this video are enough to create a problem for the console versions of Payday 2. So when you put all 3 of them together, you begin to see just how much of a problem Overkill and Starbreeze truly face when it comes to the development of content on Payday 2's console versions. As painful as it is for me to say, and as painful as it is for you to hear, I think all of us need to accept that, as Mikhail said in the Winds of Change post, console will never truly catch up to PC. And I'm sure it makes a lot of you sit there and question, okay, well why bother with Payday 3? Surely they're going to do this all over again. Okay, well let's break that question down and create a few pointers that we can counteract this with based on what I've discussed in this video. First off, Payday 3 is confirmed to be running on Unreal Engine 4, an engine that is far better known at developing content for PC and consoles, and so porting content between those platforms won't be nearly as much of a challenge. Second off, Starbreeze recently gained that 250 million injection that I've been talking about at points throughout this video. That is for Payday 3, as well as paying off their debts. They can use that money accurately and efficiently to make sure that the console versions are on the right foot as PC, right from when the door opens when that game first releases in 2022 to 2023. And thirdly, more than half of Starbreeze's game developers are now working on Payday 3, so it's safe to say that there are more than enough people there to spread across all of the platforms Payday 3 could release on. And when you consider how porting the content will be much easier on the engine, and with the funding that they'll have, it wouldn't matter if most of those devs are working on a PC version or a console version, since it would hopefully be very easy to transfer the development between platforms as and when they need. But finally, and perhaps most importantly, Overkill and Starbreeze are well aware of the mistakes they've made. They know they're not very popular amongst the console community, and every single error they've made in the past is not something that they've just forgotten about. They are well aware that this time they have to get consoles right from the beginning. They're on shaky ground enough as it is, and I truly don't believe they'd have already confirmed console versions for Payday 3 if they thought they were going to have issues again. All eyes are on them. They cannot afford to make the same mistakes again. But as we take a step back from discussing Payday 3, it's safe to say that the last 7 years of Payday 2's life cycle are a lot less pleasant for those of us who've played it on platforms other than PC. But to those of you still watching this video, to those of you still waiting for console news, I hope this video has opened your eyes and offered a true insight into the issues Overkill face when it comes to developing these console updates. Hopefully we will get more updates in the future, but right now all we can do is stay optimistic and keep thinking positively as we await more news on both Payday 2 console content and the release of Payday 3 on all platforms. I'm hopeful that we will see more Payday 2 console updates in the future, even if we will never be brought fully up to speed, and I'm hopeful that you will all stay on board on this journey with me and show patience as we await that information. As I said at the start of this video, I will only be able to report the news when I get it, and please trust in me that when I do get that news, it will be out the door as fast as I can physically get it. But I do hope this video has given you some kind of perspective and more of an overall idea as to why console updates take so long to be developed, and hopefully now you'll keep that in mind as we go forward into the future. But either way, if you have enjoyed this video, please do consider giving it a like, as it shows me you like this kind of video and would like to see more. And if you're new to the channel, then feel free to click that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with all of my future Payday 2, Payday 3, and anything else Payday themed content. And if you do wish to support me just a little bit more than doing all of those things, then feel free to have a look over on my Patreon page to pledge your support. Donations are never expected but are always appreciated and will always help to support the channel to keep things going. And if you're not a member of the channel's Discord server yet, feel free to check that out too using the link in the description below. But until next time, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Take it easy, look after yourselves, and I'll see you all soon.